Nvidia just said that their RTX 4000 GPUs are selling out. They're not just talking about the 4090, they're talking about the 4080 and the 4070 Ti. What are you guys doing? You guys all buying them? Let's press X for doubt because this doesn't really make any sense. Even though Nvidia stock price are like jumping up massively, I think it went up like 14%, but it's not related to their GPU sales. It's going to have more to do with all of the AI stuff that they're doing since they're pretty heavily invested into that. But let's go check around. I even went to my local micro center. Is it true that these GPUs are selling out? I mean, I hadn't checked in a few days. The last time that I checked, there were a lot in stock, and even the RTX 4090, which was definitely selling out, that I'll give it to them, but they weren't talking about this GPU specifically. As I look at my local micro center, look what they have sitting on the shelf. Of course, they're going to have 4080s, they have 4070 Ti's, and they even have a bunch of open box GPUs. They have a return 4080, very common to see, and of course, they had an RTX 4090. But not just any 4090. They had the 4090 Asus Strix, which, albeit it's the most expensive one, but really high in demand. In fact, this morning they had like 9 of them. Now it's down to 4. So that GPU, it definitely sells, but that's because people like the Asus Strix. It's a cool GPU. What are you going to do? Overall, I even checked on Newegg. The 4090 is in stock. We don't even have to check the 4080, but I did anyway. And of course, they're all in stock. 4070 Ti, all in stock. Newegg is going to be a place where more people have access to. It's not just Micro Center. And then, of course, if we check overseas, like in Europe and Australia and different places, they have a lot of these GPUs in stock as well. So this just sounds like Nvidia using the fact that the 4090 did sell pretty well, at least initially, and grouping everything in and saying that the 4080 and 4070 Ti are selling out. After all, this wasn't an earnings call for investors, and unless they're PC gamers, what are they going to know? They just hear about the GPU shortage that happened last year, so they probably still assume it's going on, even though in reality, the crypto mining craze was really what drove that. And this is proof because gamers aren't buying these GPUs like Nvidia wants them to. Who really is paying that money for a 4080? Not that many people. Some people did. Everybody has different use cases. If you did buy a 4080 or 4070 Ti, I don't want you to feel bad at all. That's never my point. In fact, I mean, I test them and I even bought them myself. There are always use cases where it makes sense. But if we break it down objectively, they're definitely going to be overpriced for the performance that you're getting. The 4090 is also really expensive, and some people even point out that the 4080, if you talk about performance for dollar, is not that far off from a 4090, which is a valid point, but the 4090 having the performance that it has, just the upper echelon of performance, makes it so more people can justify it. It's a weird little nuance, but that's really the reality. Even if the price to performance isn't that different, it being the absolute best means that people will go out of their way to justify it. And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows 10 Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. Where does that leave us now? Well, remember, Nvidia still has a lot of inventory, as we've seen from their earnings call, as does AMD. Nvidia is not going to be the only one here, even though AMD is going to have to really reduce the prices on their GPUs in order to remain competitive. So they probably still have RTX 3000 because I see them. Sometimes it's hard to find on Newegg and places like that, but like when I go to the local store, I still see them on the shelves and they're still really expensive. They're still asking over like $500 for 3070s. That seems way too much for me. That should have been a $499 MSRP GPU, and after a few years, those should be discounted, so they're slowly dwindling away those stocks. Now, what does that mean for GPUs like the 4070 Ti and the 4080? Those are the really interesting ones because the 4090 Nvidia is going to sell and it's been very popular. The other two, not so much. So when do people start buying them? I believe that either Nvidia is going to continue to hold back the inventory so that way there's not that much on the market. That's what they said themselves, that if they hold back inventory, for example, of the RTX 4090, which they know will sell, then people are going to be forced, not forced, but they're going to have as a second choice the RTX 4080. Imagine if you need a GPU and you can't find a 4090, but you see a pretty nice 4080 and it's a few $100s cheaper. That may actually drive a lot of people to buy it. And another important point, in some countries outside of the US, I know that they do exist, the 4080 price difference is massive versus the 4090. In the US, you can find a 4090 for $1,600 and a 4080 for like $1,300 or $1,400, and it's only a $200 to $300 difference in some cases. But overseas, that difference could be massive. It could be like $1,000. So it's not apples to apples. It's often a pretty different comparison. Even though I'm sure Nvidia still sells the bulk of their GPUs in the US market, that's just typically how it is. So the 4070 Ti is another GPU that's interesting because, look, it's the cheapest next generation GPU. If somebody's looking for a fast GPU and they don't want to spend over $1,000, they only have two options really. Either you find like an AMD new GPU, it's going to be hard to find an XTX, or you go for the 4070 Ti because everything else is going to be last generation, unless you want to go and find like a 3080 or 3080 Ti. But then at that point, you might as well just get the newer one. So there's not that much choice around that price bracket. That's why that the AMD 7900 XTX at $999 is a great value, but that one is not really found very frequently. And the 7900 XT at $899 is a terrible value. That's why it stayed on the shelves. It's a similar story to the 4070 Ti. But anyway, we'll keep an eye on the GPU situation, see what stays in stock and what happens. Remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.